Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself? Okay. Okay, great.
My name is Shafak. I also work at Bond Brand Loyalty. And the reason I'm here, like any other, that to learn this tool, to cool stuff using this tool.
Okay, good.
My name is Qasim Khalid. I'm also a developer at Bond. Yeah, I just want to know what agility is all about and just kind of want to get the concept of it.
Nice, cool.
I'm Branko, working at Bond as a developer.
All right, so same sort of thing here, just really get an idea of some hands-on experience with agility to see how it works.
Yeah, really have an idea.
Great, cool.
Hopefully,
Hey, come on
get an
in.
idea how
You can sit up here or in the back if you'd like. All right, so for your folks online, I'd like to ask you guys, if you have any burning questions or why you guys wanted to attend this workshop, what you want to get out of it. So I'm just going to go from sort of top to bottom here on the participants. Mario, would you care to enlighten us on what you want to get out of this session?
Hi, so yeah, Marielle, I'm from Scotiabank, and I'm just here to, I guess, learn more about the platform as well as the workshops in general, what kind of content's available so we can hopefully get more people on the team to join these.
Great. So to reiterate there, she's joining very much the same reason you guys are joining here in person, get a feel for agility and be able to do more on their own. So great, thank you for that. Andre, how about yourself?
Hi, I worked with Agility 2-3 years ago for a project, and the reason for being here is to learn if there is any updates, any changes. There is a new project coming up, working, implemented with Agility, so that's kind of the reason for being here.
Great, okay. So yeah, Andre is a developer who has actually worked with Agility before in the past, and he just wants to get a refresher to see what's new, what's in our roadmap, really just sort of catch up on things. So that's great. And so we have a user here, I believe this is Divyata. Divyata, what would you like to get out of this workshop? All right, we'll come back, dude. It's okay. We've got Josh.
Hey, yeah, I'm Josh from Cineplex. We currently are using Agility, but we've been using it for a while, so we have it in use in multiple different ways, and I guess it's not the same across all of our sites, but I kind of just want to learn what's the proper way to use Agility and to properly empower our content team.
Great, perfect. So to reiterate there, so Josh is from Cineplex, and he's a developer there. They've been using Agility for some time now in a variety of different ways, and they just want to sort of validate what they're building is the best practices and what the best way to use Agility is, make sure that they can get the most out of the platform. And Mateus?
Yeah. Hi guys. In general, we would like to know how to create dynamic page in Agility. Basically, yeah.
That's perfect. So that's actually something in particular I'll be covering in this workshop. So his question was asking how to work with the concept of dynamic pages in Agility. So we'll be covering on the workshop. So hopefully I can get to that. And then if you have any follow-up questions to that, I'd be happy to help you afterwards.
Perfect.
And Philip.
Hi, I'm also a developer from Cineplex. So I'd like to learn more about Agility and bring its full potential and best practices for the company.
Perfect. Yeah, so great. Same thing. Works at Cineplex. Would like to sort of get a refresher on best practices. Thank you. I think I missed Francisco. Francisco, what would you like to get out of this workshop? Okay, it's all right. We'll move on. So we've got the last person here. I don't think I checked in with is Yuji. You're also from Cineplex, is that right?
Yes, right.
So is it the same sort of thing? You're just trying to get a refresher and learn more about agility for best practices?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. And then we also have Letitia, is it? Letitia, so nice to meet you. What would you like to get out of this workshop?
Well, I'm a front-end developer. I have never worked with agility.
Okay.
And I would like to know a little bit more and see all like the features that are available and yeah.
Okay, great.
Learn a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I will do my best. Okay, so we're gonna get started now. For those of you who haven't already, please sign up for a sandbox. It does allow you to sort of, actually work with us throughout this workshop since this is a working session. If you don't get a chance to sign up for Sandbox, that's okay. You can still just follow along and sort of listen in. The sandboxes that you do sign up for will be, I think you'll have them for up to 8 days and then they'll automatically expire. But if you want it for more than 8 days, just send me an email and I will extend it indefinitely. So don't worry about it. But if I don't hear from you, it'll just automatically expire. Okay, cool. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is James Midler. I am the former head of our own professional services department. So there was a time where agility, we actually had, we had the core product and we also had our own services team. So for some time we were actually building sites for our customers directly. We always had a partner network of development partners as well that would also build websites for customers. But since then, agility has pivoted. So we no longer have our own services team. And so we are relying on people like you guys to actually go out and build solutions using agility. And so my role now, I used to be managing project managers and developers building agility sites. Now I'm helping you guys, empowering you developers to be able to build on agility. And so my job is to help support you guys in that. So if you ever have any questions regarding our partner network, getting training, just general platform questions, please let me know. I'm your guy. You can ask me about anything: development, architecture, training docs, feature requests, anything Azure related. I'm also really getting into a lot of JavaScript lately, so if you want any questions about that kind of stuff, I'm all yours. You can contact me a variety of different ways: email, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are all good channels. Some tips for today's workshop. It might be worth opening up this presentation on yourself, just so that you can follow along. Necessarily, if I go too fast, you can go back and look at the slides on your own. I'm just going to copy this link and paste this into the Zoom chat for our remote attendees, in case they want to check that out. And then for you guys that are here, did you want to write that on the board quickly? That link. There's a marker there.
Put it in Zoom. I'll just get in front of you. Oh yeah, I'm on Zoom.
Just for the folks here, so because I'm going to move on from this slide. Yeah, bit.ly/agldev-0319. Perfect. We are going to be going through labs. So I'll be saying, okay, now we're going to do this thing. The expectation is that it'd be good for you guys to follow along. Again, there might be times where you might fall behind. That's okay. We are going to have a few breaks because I don't know if you noticed, but we have like this room until like 5 o'clock. So we'll be here for some time. I'll try to put in some breaks so we don't all get too tired. And we can use that chance to catch up. And if you get too far behind, don't worry about it. These slides are going to be public. Same as a recording for the whole session. You also have the sandbox and all these materials you can work through on your own. Also goes for the same thing if you have someone that didn't make it to the workshop today, you want to share this stuff with, just send them the link to the presentation here, and they can go still sign up for Sandbox, follow the exact same steps all on their own. So the agenda, we're gonna try to keep things not too in-depth and a little high level. But first off, I'm gonna go through an overview of just sort of what agility is and what it's all about and sort of where we're coming from. Then we're gonna actually dive into actually doing some coding and actually saying, okay, we're gonna go through and actually build a blog. You know, this is what you would do as a developer if you wanted to build out a blog functionality. And then we'll try to take it all the way through if we have time to actually deploying this update. So we'll all be starting from the sandbox, making some updates, and deploying that. So if all goes well, we should have some experience starting everywhere from like, you know, thinking about content architecture to implementing it all the way through to development. So without further ado, just this there. Let's talk a little bit about the agility architecture, because I think this is a very important concept. So before we talk about actually like, you know, how to develop on anything like that, it's important to understand really how agility works right now, how you can build on agility. So agility is a true cloud CMS, and by that I mean that we are a multi-tenant application. So some CMSs have, they say they're cloud, but really all they're doing is just taking like a CMS install like WordPress and putting it up in the cloud. That's technically cloud, but it's not a true cloud solution. A true cloud solution means that, you know, you have a platform team that can manage that whole thing and service for you. So that's what we offer, and it's all multi-tenant. So we have a tenant in Canada and the US. So if your customers or yourself have any restrictions on where that data is stored, it can be stored in Canada or US, depending on what you need to do. But the benefits of having a multi-tenant CMS is that, you know, whenever we have updates to the CMS in terms of whether it's a feature or a bug fix, anything like that, that goes out to all of our customers. There's only one version. So it's not like, you know, you buy agility and you're stuck on one version, or you manually have to update it later. You don't need to worry about that. That is all managed for you. So all of our customers are always going to be in the latest version, and then the updates and releases that we do, we obviously make sure that you know, those aren't going to break anything. It's a lot easier to do when everyone else is on the same version. We're also what we call, I haven't quite figured out the right term to define this, how you want to call it, but we're sort of a hybrid CMS, more kind of on the headless side. I'll explain some differences there, but the main thing is that there are several different ways you can build on agility. By default, agility is a decoupled CMS, and so when I say decoupled CMS, it means that, you know, your CMS is in the cloud up here, but your website can be wherever you want it to be. They're not together. They're not part of the same thing like other traditional CMSs. So by that logic, we are sort of a headless CMS. That being said, we've done a lot of work in .NET. So we have a .NET SDK, essentially a NuGet package that can be installed in your MVC website that does a lot of work for you. So in that sense, you know, that is something more to the traditional sense where you have sort of code that you install in an application and it does a lot of stuff for you. So by that model, we're sort of a little bit more traditional, but that's just one way of working with agility. So you can work with agility using a .NET MVC website, using this .NET SDK, and we call that our sync model, or a sync SDK. So I'll talk about that a little bit here. I'm not going to show you guys the video. I'm just going to explain it instead. So agility is, you have that up in the cloud. You have your website wherever you want it to be. In this workshop, we're talking mainly about how to make it work with .NET. But the key is content. Your website isn't constantly fetching content from the CMS. That would be slow. You know, think about calling an API on a page. If you're calling APIs multiple times all the time, that's probably going to end up, like, your page would take a long time to load because you're making external API requests. So when we built agility, we came out and said, okay, well, how can we build a CMS that doesn't have that problem. Doesn't rely on an API and you have to make like a billion calls. Doesn't rely on a database, because again, you know, if you're constantly looking up stuff directly from a database, when you're running content on page, your database is going to become the bottleneck. So how can we solve those problems? And so what we came up with was syncing content. So what we would do is you have your CMS in the cloud, your website over here in a different place, different data center, doesn't matter where it is. When you publish content in the CMS, that content actually synchronizes across the internet to wherever that web server is, and that web server accepts that content and saves it in its file system. So that means that deployed web server has a copy of all the content it needs to render content on your website. That means that, you know, you could send thousands, millions of requests to that web server, and that web server never has to make an external call to any other third-party dependency. It has all the information it needs, all the content that it needs directly on the server. And then when we built this agility.web.net SDK as an interface to help you access the content that's in the file system there. So as you're a developer, and you'll see through this workshop, it's very easy to work with Agility content. You don't need to think about how you get data. It's just there already for you. So that's one model, and that's syncing content using .NET. We also have another way of doing things, and we're actually currently working on this right now. Should have something to show you for you guys very soon. So we built some brand new REST-based APIs that are extreme high availability and behind a global CDN. So that means you can hammer that API as much as you want to, it's not going down. And it has no dependency on the database. So, you know, that means that any front-end developer who's familiar with JavaScript, for example, can build a website that accesses content from Agility really easy out of the box. They don't have to understand what .NET is or anything like that, and they can build things that way. That also opens the door for other really cool front-end technologies like static site generators. So being able to sort of bundle up a site with all the content you need and deploy that as a package with all your files already pre-rendered. You know, that is just another way to solve the same problem of, you know, how do you make sure the database isn't a bottleneck? So 2 different ways to solve those problems. And just to reiterate, this workshop is mainly around using the .NET Sync SDK because that's sort of what we have right now, which is still ready, like production ready. But we do have this new REST API coming out, and I'll be giving out more specific workshops on those in the future, specifically around, you know, how to work with content just using JavaScript, whether it's a Node application or a React app, and static site generators like Gatsby. So if you have any questions about that kind of stuff after the workshop, let me know, and I can fill you guys in a little bit more. Before I move on here, does anyone have any questions about that general sync model? Because it is quite unique. As far as I know, there's no other CMS out there that does that. So I know it can be a little weird to wrap your head around. You know, as a developer, when you're working with content, there is no database. You don't work with a database. You just work with content files that are just sort of magically synced to your web server. Any questions? No?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes?
So you're saying that when you publish the content, everything goes to the website, and actually the content manager is off, delete, sort of thing, right?
Yeah. So the content manager always has like you can always access the content in there and change the content, publish the content, whatever. But they're decoupled completely.
Correct.
Yes.
But all the calls that those pages make to an API, external API, you know what I'm talking about. That is the .NET framework that you mentioned, or how, because that content is not hard-coded, it's not very dynamic. Do I get the question?
No, I'm not sure if I understand your question. No.
In our case,
yeah,
when we have our API hosted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Remember?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very specific question. Okay.
So
yeah.
Information about offers, clients, and that actually connected to the API.
Yeah.
So when that content is published, how that information, how that, let's say, static page, I can say it like that, actually calling the API.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in this particular case, we're talking about like agility content that gets merged with some sort of other external content.
Yeah.
In your case, it's another API, right? So the way that whole system is set up is that you create content in the CMS, you publish that out. The agility CMS content gets synchronized to the web server. The web server has it. And then for other sort of third-party content or third-party data from another API, that never really gets interfaced within agility necessarily. It's more of the website developer who implemented that, who will go and say, okay, I have the agility content here, and now I'm going to go make an external API request to this other system, pull that in, and then maybe manage caching that way. So it's not really anything that's agility specific. It's just more about the implementation of sort of bringing those things together. But there are a lot of things developers can do to do those types of integrations. So for example, I know in this case too, this was a specific case where the developer actually created a custom field in agility that actually pulls content from an external API. So you can do a lot of interesting things there where you can actually have it so that an editor is in the CMS and they're actually working with content that's coming from another system and either saving a copy of that in agility as agility content or just saving a reference to an external item. And then maybe the website developer uses that external ID and says, okay, now I'm going to make this API request to get the rest of that other content from some other system. Is that sort of
Are we going to talk about that later?
I mean, that is pretty advanced. So we won't be covering custom fields necessarily in this session. Be focusing more mainly on agility content. But if you have any other specific questions, we can talk about.
A link or something that actually shows that.
Yeah, we can talk about that afterwards.
Thank you.
Anyone else online have any questions around how agility CMS content is synced to web servers or that concept? No? Okay, cool. So let's take a look a little bit about how web content management works within agility. So in agility, you're always building your own custom content, right? If you have a brand new agility instance, it's going to be empty. Because the whole idea is that all of your content that you're creating in your CMS are specifically for you. It's not like you get like a turnkey solution website that you now have to go in and modify and hack things around. It doesn't work that way. It's all designed to be built from the ground up, specifically based on your requirements. So usually what ends up happening is when you're building an agility website, you start off with designs, and then you look at those designs, you start breaking those things down and say, okay, how can editors manage content if this is what the website's going to look like? So that's usually an architect that figures that out. So what they're doing in that process is they're building like a bespoke schema in the cloud. If you're familiar with database, it's kind of like that. You're sort of defining your content schema. Of course, you don't actually work with the database, but same concept. And you define the page templates, modules, and content. Again, nothing is decided for you. It's all done bespoke. And then finally, you actually want to output code on your website using your front-end framework of choice. So your website is going to interface with that content, and then you can use any sort of front-end framework you'd like to display that, whether that be modern JavaScript tools like Vue or React, or just plain old vanilla HTML and JavaScript or jQuery or whatever. Again, agility is a headless CMS in that concept, so we don't dictate the front end how that's going to look like or anything like that. It's just a way to get data in and out of your website and easily accessible. So show you guys a couple things here. Let's actually show you some of the stuff in the actual content manager. So let me get this box out of the way here. There we go. So what I'm looking at right now is my sandbox, or a copy of my sandbox. For those of you that did sign up for a sandbox, you will see something similar, or you should see something similar once you've actually logged in. If you're having trouble logging in here, you can let Charlie in the corner there or Tunch there, and they can help you with anything you might be experiencing. So I'll just go through a very quick demonstration of web content management and what that is sort of comprised of. Agility does have several sort of different components, one being web content management, another one being user content. We won't get into user content too much in this one, but the idea with user content is that it's another way to manage content that's coming in from the website, such as form submissions, reviews. Maybe you have people that post blogs on your site that you want to have. That's user content. That's a little bit different. So in this demonstration, we'll be talking about web content management. So web content management includes pages, shared content, and media and documents. So when you click on pages here, you're going to see a page tree on the left-hand side that represents individual pages for the CMS. And so for example, if I look at my home page here, you'll be able to see essentially a structure of my home page. And just so we can see kind of what's what here, I'm going to open this up in live mode. So this is going to show me my website right now in a live scenario. Actually, what I'm going to do, yeah. So, oops, back home. So our homepage here is really basic. And again, this developer sandbox isn't meant to wow you in terms of front end. As you can see, it's pretty basic. It's pretty much just a Bootstrap template. That's because mainly we want to focus on, you know, how to actually do development on things, and the sort of front end piece, you'll be able to see sort of where that gets slot in. And I'm sure if I tried to wow you with front end stuff, I probably wouldn't do a very good job of it. So that's why I did that. So this is our homepage here. On the top, you can see that we have this sort of banner at the top. It says Jaguar Computers. And then further down here, we have, you know, a listing of sort of featured items or columns in our website. So finding the corresponding content in Agility should be fairly straightforward. You should be able to see your content zones. So for example, here we have one main content zone, and a content zone represents an area where editors can add functionality to a page. So in this case here, we only have 2 modules. It's pretty basic, and we only have one content zone. That's because the layout or the design of this particular website that I implemented is just one column. There's just a column in the middle, you put stuff at the bottom, modules just stack on top of each other. But you might have a more complicated layout. So for example, you know, the contact us page, I believe is using like a 2-column template. Yeah, as we see here. So we have content on the left, content on the right. And so if we want to find this page in the content manager, contact-us, all we need to do is go into pages here, find the page called contact-us, and then you can see here a page with an example of different content zones. And again, as the architect or the developer who is implementing these pages, you can really decide where editors can modify content. So, you know, if you have certain pages where you're like, you know, you really don't want people messing around with the type of content that's there or the order of things, you can be as strict as you like as a developer to implement things. So for example, one content zone may only power a very small piece of the page, and maybe everything else on the page, it just sort of works out of the box or is powered by a different system altogether. You can mix and match that way, depending on how you want to do it. In this case, this whole site is essentially powered by Agility content, but you can always mix and match, have an MVC site pulling in resources from whole different things, other CMSs, other APIs, and you can sort of decide what uses what content. And so what determines the content zones on a page is considered a page template. We'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. But generally, these are pages here. You can obviously move around modules. You can add modules to pages. You can modify, you know, SEO settings on pages such as meta description, keywords, all that fun stuff. You can also do some things here like add in some marketing scripts. I don't recommend putting in like functional JavaScript or like, you know, code for your image slider or anything in here. That's not what this is designed for. This is mainly meant for like image tracking pixels or Google Analytics scripts, or just those usually things that JavaScript marketing needs added to a page that really doesn't belong in your source code. Pages also have versions on them. So you can always view the history of any page or content item and revert to any previous version. So all content in Agility has versioning. You can always go back to a previous version, no worries. And then all content follows a sort of publishing workflow. You can, when you make changes to something, that content goes into a staging mode, and then you publish it. When something in the staging mode, you can preview what that content's going to look like on your website. So I'll give you guys a quick example of that. I'm going to go back to our home page here, and I'm just going to reverse the order of these modules. So I'm going to reorder them so that the featured content is above the sort of banner that we have. So now you can see here that my page is in a preview mode. And if I hit, or sorry, it's in a staging mode. This is telling me that I have a published version of this page, but I have a pending change to this that I haven't published yet. And actually, if I look at history, you'll see here that the one that's green, it says the word published, this is telling me, hey, this is the one that's currently live right now on your website, but the current version I have has a change that has not been published yet. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to preview content. So I'm going to hit preview. This is going to reload my page here, and it's going to put it into a preview mode for me. What this is actually happening in the background is this is actually, when you're previewing content, the website gets put into mode where it's actually pulling down content on demand. So that's why it's a little bit slower when you're previewing, because it has to actually fetch content from the CMS. Whereas when you're viewing it in live mode, it's just looking at its own content files underneath and never is making an external request. So, you know, here we have an example where we were just able to change the order of these modules. We haven't published it yet, and so I can actually exit preview mode here and go back to see, hey, what's it going to look like? What does it look like in my live version again? Oh yeah, it's this one. So again, I can see I haven't made that change. Hey, how's it going? Good. Glad you guys can make it. Yeah, grab a seat. Sorry, it's a little tight in here. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this page, just to show you guys how that works. So we publish this page, and you'll actually see here that bar turned blue momentarily. So that's telling you that there's a current sync happening. So this is copying the file to our web server. And when that's done, it'll turn green to let us know that, yeah, this is published. So a lot of people ask us, you know, what's the delay, or how long does it take for something to come live on the website after making a change? As soon as the sync is done, it'll be live. So you can see here in the top, yeah, there's a few things going on there. Syncing, and now it's green. So now the update has actually gone through. Depending on how fast your web server is too, that may affect how quickly it is at doing this. So for example, my sandbox and all of your sandboxes are hooked up to not a very beefy server, a smallish server. There's like 150 websites on there or something like that. So it probably took an extra 10 seconds when it normally wouldn't in a production scenario. But if I go back here and I just hit refresh, you'll be able to see my updated content. So I just made a quick content update, switch the orders and modules around. Yep.
While the syncing process is happening, what happened with the website?
Oh, nothing. So what ends up happening is when something is synced, syncs happen in what's called, this is getting pretty low level, but syncs actually happen in a batch. So it's like, there's like, when you publish something, it sort of does a batch all at once. Because when you do a publish, sometimes it publishes multiple things together. In this case, I think it was just, I think you might have published the whole page, so it does a few different things. It goes, that copies the web server. The web server puts everything in like sort of a temp folder until it has everything as part of that batch. And then it copies the things from the temp folder to the live folder on the web server, replacing the existing files, content that were there, or creating new files. And when that happens, there's the code in agility.web, our sync SDK, has cache dependencies based on those files. So whenever those files update, or the timestamp on those files update, they immediately get kicked out of cache, because there's managed cache as well on the website. So it'll immediately get kicked out of cache. So the next request that comes to the website is going to fetch that new content as opposed to the stale content. The website doesn't go down or anything like that. It's all it's doing is just reading files, right?
The user experience is not damaged at all.
No, you wouldn't notice. You wouldn't notice anything. No. Yeah, it's pretty magic. So that's pages, and a pretty simple example of pages. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit quickly here is shared content. So here we're looking at cases where we have content such as our Jumbotron, And you can see here we have content directly on what's called a module. And the module is the individual components of that page. So our Jumbotron is that banner that said Jaguar Computers. Now I can go ahead and make a change here to this content, save it and show you guys what that's going to look like. But the content that I have here in this module is only on this module. So if I had, let's say I wanted to reuse that same banner on a different page, like our About Us page, I wouldn't be able, if I made this change here, that other page's content wouldn't update automatically because it has its own version of the module with its own content. So that's why we have something called shared content. Shared content is essentially just a bucket of content. You can create items and you can create lists. So in shared content here, you'll see that we have products, colors, global footer, header, product categories. Those are sort of content for this website that isn't specific to a page and is shared across multiple things. So because this is sort of a mock product site, we have a list of products. We have a list of product categories. And in this particular case, we're actually using dynamic page lists, which I'll get into shortly. We have the global header item and the global footer item. And these represent the sort of header you see at the top there, and the footer you see at the bottom, which is kind of covered by this thing right now. So for example, if I look at the global header, you'll be able to see that I have a site name and I have a site logo. The site name is what shows this guy up at the top here, and then the navigation at the top is actually done dynamically based off of the pages in the page tree, which is pretty cool. So what that means is if I change the name of a page, here, let me just do a couple things here. So one, so let's just go ahead and change that. And then let's also make a change here to pages where let's actually just change. So on the home page here, you'll see in the SEO tab, there's a menu text. So I'll just say menu text updated. So now if I refresh here, you're going to see two things have been updated. I'll have my, it says live mode. I have to preview still. So preview, get back in preview mode. And preview mode is always dictated by the preview bar that you'll see at the top here. So I wasn't in preview mode, so I didn't see anything. You'll be able to see your preview bar pop up here shortly. There you go. And now you can see the content left row has changed and the home updated title has changed. I can also do things like, change the order of pages around. So wait, did I actually move anything there? Yeah, I did. So now when I refresh this, you'll see that products and customer gallery actually get flipped in order on the website there. So now customer gallery is first, followed by products. So these are all things that you sort of think about when you're building a page in Agility. How is the header going to work? How are they going to modify content in the header? And how are they going to manage their menu? In this case here, it's built off the sitemap, which is really cool. And I'll show you the code for that shortly. But it's a great way to manage menus. Otherwise, everything else you see in shared content, just think of this as like a general place where if you need to create lists of things, they probably belong here. Especially if they're going to be used on more than one page, they probably belong here. Then we also have media and documents. Media and documents is essentially the place where you're going to put all of your media and documents. Kind of says it all. So typically, like images, PDFs, SVGs. You can even put HTML documents here if you really wanted to. You could, in theory, host a static website on here if you had to. So mainly it's used for images though. Anything that you put here is propagated to a CDN. So this is actually backed by the Azure CDN. So the idea is when you upload documents here and you're referencing them on your website, if someone in India tries to access your website and is downloading an image, they're going to download it from closest data center to them geographically. That's just the images. They still have to access wherever your website is. So, that is a whole nother conversation about, putting websites behind behind another CDN, that's a bit of a different conversation, but also doable. All right, so I'm going to flip back to presentation here.
Is there a limit to how much access we can put on an asset, like terabytes of data? Like
You get a good question. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, generally speaking, I think it's it is in the agreements that we put forth when a customer does sign on. So there is an agreement where it's, you know, some people have different limits. Typically, I don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 25 gigs free. And if you need anything more than that, then there is an additional sort of SKU that we charge on top of that.
And comes to images, are they optimized for the website, or it needs to be taken care of when they get put there?
Great question. So let's actually go back to, I'll show you an example here. Let's look at, let's grab an image here.
So what's the question? I didn't hear from my-
Oh yeah, just to reiterate. But yeah. So the question for the online folks, if you guys didn't hear either, was you know, how are images optimized?
Just wondering who needs to take care of that. Is it taken care of already as part of the import and gets cleared on the site, or?
So here's an example of just straightforward image, 400 by 250, right? It's actually pretty small sized image. It probably doesn't need to be optimized further than that, but that's just the original size that was uploaded into Mediant Documents. Now you can, as a developer, put in some additional optimizations here. So let's say we want this to show actually at 200 pixels wide. So we allow the editor to upload a big size image. But on the website side, we can just append a query string w equals 200, and that's going to automatically thumbnail the image for you. And that gets saved in the CDN as well. So it gets generated on demand. The first request you put in, then it gets saved there. So all subsequent requests to that are fast. So that is really powerful as a developer, actually, being able to do that. It's also a lot easier for the editors as well too. You're not really forcing them to, you know, resize an image or anything like that. So if you can automatically just thumbnail things as you need to display them on the website, that's like the perfect case. Yeah. Exactly. And then there also are ways within the CMS when you're defining like an image field to actually put restrictions on it. So like even without thumbnailing, let's say you're not thumbnailing at all, you can still put restrictions in the editor to make sure the editor doesn't use an image that's like larger than 300 kilobytes, for example.
So I assume this is part of the image source link. Then you use it, just add all these parameters.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So like, yeah, whenever you're sort of outputting the image, you just append those query string parameters at that time. Yeah.
What are the parameters?
Well, there's several. There's width. There's also height. So we can set the height to like 100, for example. So now that just crops some of the top and the bottom off there. There's also a crop type. So you can do at C, I always forget which is which.
Yeah.
What's C1, do you remember?
I don't remember. I just wanted to know, like just wanted other folks to know that the other parameters that you can use.
Yeah.
Quality is one of them.
So this one here is we're actually cropping it at specifically 200 by 100, and then we're adding in white to sort of maintain the aspect ratio, which is also can be very handy in some cases when you have a lot of images that are very irregular, like they're not all the same sizes. So you can use this to sort of standardize how they actually appear on your website. There's also a quality parameter. So if people are uploading images that are actually technically in terms of image size pretty good, sometimes images are still just way too high quality. So like the actual size of it. So you can decrease the quality. So you can set quality is percentage, right?
Yeah. 10%.
Yeah. So if I said this 10%, it's obviously not going to look very good.
It should be fine still because it's just.
Yeah, I guess it's a small enough image anyways. It doesn't really do much. But you can play around with the quality parameter as well to just keep sizes of the images down a little bit. So those are all very useful tools. Any other questions around images? There's one last section here that I wanted to follow here. So under settings, This is another place where you'll probably spend a lot of time developing in Agility. There's a lot of things in here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but mainly when you're creating new schema definitions. So there's module definitions. So, we already looked at Jumbotron and that featured content model. We will play around with those a little bit. You can see here are the definitions for those here. So if I open up Jumbotron, you'll be able to see that I have a title, a reference name, a description of what the module actually does. And then my form builder here, this is an example of, these are all the fields that I wanted to set up. And this is what the editor types into the module to actually have it render. So we collect title, summary, a learn more label, and a learn more URL. And just a refresher, that corresponds directly to this guy. So we have title, subtitle, summary, and then learn more button and the URL.
What languages do you support? Can you toggle on English, French,
Yep.
Spanish?
Great question. So Agility, this sandbox is only set up with one language right now, just for its simplicity. But Agility supports multi-language sites out of the box. So the way multi-language sites work is you create a new language, and then every single piece of content you create, you have a choice on whether you want to create corresponding content in the other language. And when you do that, it actually links the content together by the same content ID. And so that way, as a developer, when you're switching between, like, let's say you're on one page in English and you want to switch to a different page in Spanish, for example, our Agility.web SDK will actually automatically figure out, oh, hey, if you're on this page, we have this corresponding page in this other language. If you just switch the language by actually just appending a query string to the current page, it'll just redirect you to the French version. And then it'll happen automatically.
What happens if the page is not there in that language?
If they're not there in the language, then it would 404. Or you can set it up to redirect to like the home page for the Spanish site, for example. Yeah.
No limits on character set, like on any language?
There's Chinese sites.
Yeah, we actually
Mandarin.
re-implemented it. Yeah. We have some customers that are, where everything is actually all using Chinese characters.
It's usually French, Spanish, Chinese, like Mandarin.
Yeah.
That we had.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any limits that we have on that.
So Latin alphabet and Cyrillic is not one of them. I guess we haven't tried it.
I don't know. Yeah. And then you can also do a lot of more custom things too. Like sometimes you're going to have very specific rules as a developer too, where it's like, oh, if this page exists in a language, go to that page. Or if it doesn't exist, go to a different page. So you can always implement that logic custom as well. So we have stuff that works out of the box, but you can always extend that, or just not use it at all and build a custom way of managing that stuff. And then a module here also has something like an output template. We'll talk about this in a bit more detail when we actually go ahead and create a module. I'll show you how that works. But generally, here's where you'll be able to find all those definitions. All your content definitions for those things we saw in shared content all live in here. And then you'll see here under site configuration, we also have a list of syncing web servers. Going back to the sort of core concepts of how this site is built, it's using the Sync SDK. So you need to enter in a list of web servers you want to synchronize your content to. So in a real scenario, you'd probably have more than one web server listed here. In this case, we just have one, which is just one like production one. Again, it's just a sandbox. But in a real scenario, you probably have one for production, one for UAT, and like one for maybe dev. So you might do daily builds to dev, and every once in a while they might break a build or something, and then you put that into UAT just for sort of a pre-production deployment, and then deploy it to production. So by default, when you have this set up with syncing web servers in multiple environments, when you publish content, it'll publish to all of your web servers. So that means that your dev, your UAT, your production all get the same content. But you don't need to publish the content, right? So let's say you're creating content here. Yeah, why not? Actually, let me rephrase that. If you publish content, it's going to go to all web servers. Otherwise, if you're creating content, you're not publishing it, it's not going to be available online. But you can preview any one of your environments. So you can preview what that new content you just created is going to look like on dev. You can preview what it's going to look like on UAT. You can also preview how it's going to look on live, which is pretty cool. So you can always sort of interface with going back between like staging content and published content on any environment, but you can have different code bases, different versions of your website code in different environments. So if you're doing a big code update, you can test how something's going to work in dev, test on UAT, and test in live. It's also kind of cool to be able to test those things in live. So if you've made code updates and you haven't deployed it live yet, but you're wondering, what would happen if I publish this content on live? Is it going to cause an error if I don't do it? If I don't like update my code on live? You can just preview the live web server and then see if it's going to cause a problem there.
Is there any limitations, like if a smart customer came along and figured out your URL query string for preview, is there a limitation that doesn't let anyone just do previews online?
It would be pretty tough to do that. I mean, our preview URLs are only valid for a certain amount of time, aren't they? Yeah.
There's a time stamp and it's just a hash of certain things basically, right?
So the only way someone would get it is if you, like for example, when you're previewing, if you're previewing content, you can hit this button to email page. Oops, that's the wrong one thing. Open my Windows mail. I never use this. Anyways, this is what you'd probably see is it's going to generate a preview link for you. So you can share this preview URL with anyone. You don't have to have an Agility sandbox. But immediately once that's pasted into the browser, it redirects. So it initializes the preview session and redirects. So someone would have to have this, and then even this link itself is going to expire. So it's fairly secure.
You have to be pretty clever.
You have to be pretty clever. You can also, again, your web servers are your web servers, right? So you can put whitelisting in there too to make sure that people can't access your site outside of a certain network or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Since it's possible to set up multiple different environments, I suppose with the same principle, you can have multiple nodes in a web farm on the production server.
Correct.
You think exactly the same way, right?
Yep.
Once you publish, it goes everywhere across all environments, including multiple solutions.
Yeah. So yeah, when you start getting into conversations about, well, like most production environments will have at least 2 servers for redundancy, right? That's what we recommend. There are many different ways you can host stuff. So for example, some of our customers that do their own custom hosting, they might have like a server farm of like 18 servers. So they can synchronize content to those servers a few different ways. One option is they can synchronize content to all 18 servers directly if they wanted to. But I wouldn't recommend that approach just because when you're synchronizing content, our system is pulling things from the database. So you don't really want to be syncing to more web servers than you need to because it'll just make syncing content a little bit slower, right? So it's going to increase the delay it takes for things to become published across all your things. Plus, it might only sync to one server first, and then the other server, which is also in the load balancer, hasn't gotten the content yet, and then the user's on your page, and some users see stuff before other users. So there's some trade-offs there. A better way to handle that in a custom scenario like that is to actually synchronize only to one endpoint, and then all you have to do is just have like a robocopy process on that single server that will then copy those files across all of your other servers in Webcom. Because really, at the end of the day, you just have to get those content files in the file system of each server, and then everything will work. So there are a variety of different ways to do that. We're always happy to help on architecture and that kind of thing too. But from our personal experience, we've been using Azure App Service for hosting some of our customer sites, because when you go with Agility, you can also choose to host your sites with us. We also do offer hosting. Right now, we only offer Azure App Service hosting. And I don't see many cases why you wouldn't be able to use Azure App Service because it's actually perfect architecture for Agility sites. I'm getting a little low level now, but essentially how it works is Azure App Service is a sort of platform as a service for Microsoft, sort of like IaaS in the cloud. So you don't have to manage the operating system or anything like that. That's all done by Microsoft. And then you can scale up and down the instances. So you can have as many instances as you want. But the beauty is the way that Microsoft Azure has architected that thing is they all share the same data file system. So all you have to do is just sync to one server, and Azure automatically, it just figures out that all the servers are able to access content from one single place. So it's actually like perfect architecture for an Agility site. much less stuff to worry about on your own. All right, so let me flip back to where I was now. Yeah. Okay. So just to recap here, think content-wise, what is in a page in Agility? Page is comprised of a page template. So the template defines where your content zones are, whether it's a 1-column or 2-column layout, 3-column layout, long parallax scrolling layout, whatever you define, that's in your page template. And then page templates have content zones. So, you have a content zone A, you have a content zone B, or you can have as many as you want, and you place your modules all within there. So content zone has a list of modules, and you can, at any time, move a module between one content zone to another content zone. You can also copy a module to a different page altogether if you want. So if you created a module on one page with all this content, you can just copy it to a different page, and it'll work fine too. Are there any questions around this sort of basic, how a page is actually laid out? No? Okay. Well, then this might be a little redundant then. But this whole thing is essentially, like, if you're thinking about like code-wise, there's like a div container on this. This is essentially the page template. Then you have a content zone, which again is kind of like in its own little HTML container. It's here. And then on the right-hand side, you've got your content zone B. You might have a module here and a module up top there. And then this is just like blank space. So now let's jump into some actual code. We'll actually open up Visual Studio and actually show you, how you can actually make updates to websites and how you can updates to core functionality of websites. So with our Done at MVC solution, it follows an MVC pattern. We support pretty much any version of MVC framework. I think this specific example is using MVC4, which I'm sorry, I just haven't updated it in a while. I guarantee it works with MVC5. Works perfectly fine. It does rely on that agility.web NuGet package. So if you have an MVC site, you don't have to have a brand new MVC site. You just need to have the reference to agility.web in there. So that means you can take an existing MVC site and add an agility after the fact as well. And then you can configure it to only handle parts of the page or the whole application, whatever you want to do. There is another piece here, which is the Agility Website Service SVC. So there's a WCF endpoint within the root of the application, and that's the sort of endpoint that we use for syncing. So the content server is going to go hit that endpoint to synchronize content. So if you are thinking of putting a server like a dev or UAT environment behind a firewall or anything like that, you just want to make sure that our content server can access this endpoint on your thing. So you could write a rule that says, hey, only allow our content server with these IP addresses to access this route. So you could lock it down like that if you wanted to. Customizable routing. So this one's a key component. I sort of touched on already, but the idea is that you can have Agility try to handle all of your page routes automatically. So like any incoming request comes into your website, Agility will try to route it for you automatically. Or you can set it up so that Agility only sort of renders like, some paths, not all paths. Yeah. Oops. Too fast. So a page template, as we sort of talked about that concept, is essentially just in the MVC world, it's a razor partial view. Pretty straightforward there. A module output can be a controller action result, or it can be a razor partial view. So a controller action result is if you want to do a little bit more logic up front and then return that model to your view. And a razor partial view is essentially just it's like HTML, but it has like a little bit of server-side code in it. So we essentially pass the data through to the front end via the razor partial view. And then that's where you have all your HTML, your CSS, JavaScript, all that fun stuff. We also provide a auto-generated, strongly typed API classes for all of your content models. I'll show you an example of that afterwards. Agility.web, that's the thing that actually gets installed in your website. It's the core assembly of the Agility SDK and required if you want to use the sync model. There's dependency on MVC in there, handles all your syncing for you. It is available on NuGet, and we do update it fairly often if we're implementing new features or bug fixes. It has a lot of other stuff too. Page routing, page template execution, module execution, content access deserialization, URL redirections, some other stuff that's hidden by this thing. Output caching, preview mode, development mode, live mode, language context management, channel management, and much more. So there's a lot of stuff going on down there. The good news is as developers, you don't really need to worry about that stuff. It just all just sort of works for you. And that's the model we like about Agility, is that it's pretty structured. So when you have any developers doing work, they all pretty much end up doing the same type of work. No one really goes off on a tangent doing something in a very weird way, because it's pretty straightforward. I don't know what the best place is. I would put it there. The Agility page render lifecycle. So when a request comes into an MVC site, Agility will look at the incoming request and say, okay, so let's say a request is coming in for the About Us page. It'll look in your route config, because again, this is an MVC application, so it'll check your route config and say, hey, is the incoming route, does this match the Agility route? If it does, then the Agility web will pick it up and say, okay, this page is being rendered. We know what page template this is using, so it's going to use this page template, execute that template, and that template will essentially go through and execute each module that's on the page. So I'll show you guys this in more detail. And then lastly, render body. So all the HTML is served to the client, and it's all server rendered. So we'll just quickly show you guys how to run an Agility website locally. And then after that, we'll take a quick break. There's coffee and stuff in the kitchen, water, if you want to get out and stretch your legs. I also heard that there's some weird event happening right now on the 5th floor you might want to check out. So to run a project locally in Agility, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to find the solution file for your source code. So for those of you that did download the Sandbox, when you signed up for the Sandbox, you should have been taken to a page. You may have also received an email, and it should have a folder there that has the source code. So what I'm talking about is a page that looks like this. So when you're on this page here, after you sign up for your Sandbox, you should be able to just click the source code download button, and that's going to download a zip file for you that has all your content. So take a moment now and download that source code.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I copy from
So yeah, when you do get that file open, and extract it, you'll see there's an S folder. You also need to go in here. Maybe I should fix the formatting on this. And then you'll want to open up the .solution file that's within there. So the path would be S MVC4 sample site, and then open up the solution package there. And once you've got that open, it should look something like this. So, and then once you have this open, it should be actually as simple as just going to debug, start without debugging. If you haven't opened it already, it's going to download any of the dependencies via NuGet, and then it'll run this using IIS Express. And if it's the first time you're running it, it will be pulling content. It's kind of like when you're in a preview mode on the web server, it pulls down content. So you'll see here at the top, very similar to how we had a preview bar, we now have a development mode bar, which notifies us that, hey, we're running this locally, and it's going to be pulling in the latest content that we have in the CMS. So that way you can create new content in the CMS, test it locally and on your deployed web service in preview mode without actually publishing it. And you can see here, this is hooked up to the same sandbox that I was just working with, the one that was deployed. So locally, I have all those content changes that I made before. Remember, I changed this, that, and this stuff. And to show you guys, where these magic content files are that are being synced, if I go to my PC here, go to C drive, Agility content, you'll actually see here that I have a website. What is this one? Under staging folder here, on a production server, if things are being published to me, I'd have a live folder here, but again, I'm just running this locally. So I have a staging folder, and these are the content files for my website, or for the pages that I've actually accessed locally. And I can actually go ahead and just delete these files, clear these out. And if I refresh this here, you'll actually see those files automatically downloading and being started on my file system. So this is kind of like what happens on the deployed web servers when you're publishing content. That published content just starts creating files in here. And that all happens offline in an offline thread. So we've got this site running locally now. And so here's where I'm going to want to take a bit of a break. So we'll take about a 15-minute break. If you have any questions or need some help getting this going, let us know. We can spend some time with you now to get caught up.
Hi. Hello.
Hello. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we have the UAT and staging and the production servers, and how do we do the setup for all the servers, all these three kind of servers from the Agility?
Yeah. So what you would do is you would have, depending on what web service you're using. So do you know what web server you would be using? Would it be like a VM with IIS, or would you use more of a platform as a service like Azure App Service?
Just the IIS.
Okay. Yeah. So in that case, what you would do is you would sort of set up that server, and make sure IIS is installed. You would then install the website, just like you would any normal website. And there's a few things to look at in your web.config. So in the application itself, under the web config, you'll see here that there's a few settings that you can play around with. Typically, we recommend your deployed web servers be deployed with develop mode equals false, because that ensures that by default, those servers are essentially functioning in live mode. So that way you can see published content in each environment, and you can also preview content in each environment. So you would set up those servers, install IIS, and then in Agility here, all you need to do is just go to Settings, Syncing Web Servers, and add a new web server here. So you'd give it the absolute URL to wherever your UAT environment or your dev environment would be, as long as it's accessible over the internet. That it could be just an IP address if you have it set up as a default website, or it could be something with a domain name. So like, for example, the value for this one here that we're using, we just need to put in the base URL. And what happens sort of behind the scenes is that the content server will end up calling, I just realized I was doing stuff that you can't see. Sorry about that. So you end up calling something like this, agility website service.svc. So that's the endpoint that actually gets called when content is being synced. So all you need to do is just make sure you have a service deployed that will accept that request. And that's all you need to be able to do to set up multiple environments. And then from a development perspective and DevOps perspective, you might want to, deploy your code either automatically or, the way in which you deploy that code will vary depending on what kind of web server you have set up. Did that answer your question?
Okay, I see. Yes, pretty good. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem. Does anyone else have any questions right now? Okay. So what I'm going to do here, we're going to sort of reconvene or resume, I guess, at 3:15. Okay. So I'm just going to put this in the chat. Start again at 3:15. Or actually, yeah, we'll say 3:15.
Yeah.
Pues me rechazaste.
So if we wanted to add a checkbox, we would add a new field here. Call this, let's just call this, available colors. And I'm going to actually save that as IDs. So what I did there is I added a new field, a text field that's going to be hidden. That's going to store my list of color IDs. And then I add another field here, which is just my field itself, available colors. And under field type, I can select link content. Product, no, color, content view, shared. I want it to link directly to the item that I've already initialized in shared content. And then I can render this as a checkbox list. And I want to save the values to available color IDs. And I could also do one more thing too. Available. And here I can actually also save the text. You'll see why that's handy afterwards. So now I've made a quick little change here. So yeah, here's an example of how. So now this is rendering a checkbox list for all the colors that I have in that other list. And I can select red, I can also select teal or one or the other. And really what it's going to do there, so I have selected 2 items, right? What it's going to do there is it's going to save those items to the other field that I have. So as a developer, I access those fields because I'll have an ID field, which is the comma separated list of those IDs. And then with one call, I can get the content, which again is already on the server, and just retrieve those 2 colors that I need for those. So to answer your question, I think the way you're doing it now in your CMS is probably the same way you'd do it here. And then it really just comes down to implementation side on the website and how you want that to work. If you want to talk more about that afterwards, I can maybe give you some other ideas there too. Yeah, and then I added that text column, which is kind of cool because now I can actually add that color here. And so now from the list, I can go back to content here. And then you can see here, from the list view. So in your case, if you had a list and associated multiple things, an editor could easily see just from the list view what things those are associated to. Mute. All right, so now that we understand some basic concepts of the CMS, we're going to go through the process of creating a blog. So that's going to be comprised of a few different things. We're going to actually create a module. We're going to add some front-end code. We're going to create a page template. We're also going to set up some shared content and a list of blog posts. We're also going to see how dynamic pages can be used to, you'll see why those are important. So the first thing we're going to do here is, if we're creating a blog and we're adding a blog to the site, the first thing we're going to want to do is actually create a new page template, because if you think about a blog, when you're reading it, sometimes you like to have the content of the blog sort of a little thin, maybe 700 pixels wide, not something that's like 1280, because people like to read stuff that's smaller width as opposed to big width. So we're going to create a blog template where it's a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter, better for sort of long text. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a page template with like a single content zone. We're going to add the code for that page template in our MVC project, and then we're going to create a page in the CMS using the new page template that we have. Then we're going to verify the results. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is you're going to want to go into the content manager and put in a few values here. Hold on a sec. So this thing's always in the way. So to create a new page template, you're going to go down to settings in Agility. So in the manager, you need to define a new definition. And again, when you're thinking new definitions, think settings. Same place where we have content and module depths that we can create. So we're going to select page templates here in the page tree. Well, not page tree, this is the settings tree. And you'll see here, this lists all of our current templates. We have 1 column and 2 column. We also have something that uses a shared sidebar. We want to create one that is very similar to the 1 column template, but our code, our front end code for that's going to be a little bit different. So that's a tighter area. So we're going to go ahead and create a new page template here. And so we're going to call this blog template. And under digital channel type, you're going to select website. And then under the output types here, Charlie, you're still recording, right?
Yep, we're recording.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. Under the output type, you're going to want to select relative URL. This is essentially saying, okay, when this template gets rendered, what code in the website should be used for that. So at this point, we haven't actually created our code yet, but let's be a little forward thinking here and just put it under this path. So we can put it under views, templates, and we can call this blog template.cshtml. So that's where the file is going to live that we're actually going to create here. So we're going to put that in there. And then we are also going to, under module zones here, we're going to create a single module zone that's going to hold our blog content. So we're going to call this, just call it main content zone. And you can see here that there are some advanced options here. We're not going to do them in this case, but you could, as a developer, set up a page template that has a bunch of modules already sort of scaffolded together. That way, you know, if your editor is saying, hey, I need to create this new type of page, and they don't remember which modules to put together to make it look a certain way, you could create a page template where they all sort of use the same inner code, but have different sort of modules already set up there. So that way, when an editor creates a brand new page using a template, they don't just have a blank page and they already have some modules in, then they just have to go in and enter the content. But for our case, let's just leave that blank. We know what we're doing, so let's hit save.
Okay.
Yep.
So in the digital channel type, I saw website and mobile.
Yeah.
So mobile means
to be honest,
responsive or simply.
To be honest, I wouldn't worry about it. Those actually will be removed in a future version. All channel types are. It's kind of irrelevant. There was a time, because Agility's been around for a while. There was a time where it was best practice when you're creating when you handle mobile users to have like a separate page tree or a separate website for mobile. Now that's kind of not very common anymore. You just have a responsive site that just works. So that's why at one point there was a concept of a mobile site, but really nobody uses that. Not anymore anyways. And then Facebook page, there was a time too where you'd be able to use the CMS to manage content on the Facebook page, but that has been deprecated, so that shouldn't even be there. So just select website. Just that's the way to do it. Just make your website responsive. You don't have to worry these other things. Yeah, just website. So yeah, we've got this in here now. So when you're ready, you can hit save and close. So now we've created our new blog template. Now the next thing we need to do here is actually add the code for this page template. So when this template actually gets rendered, what code actually executes. So here's where we actually get to write our first piece of code. So to do that, you're going to open up Visual Studio. And under Views, under Templates, because that's where we said we'd create it, we're going to create a brand new page template. So I'm going to go Templates here. I'm going to click on Add, View, and we're going to call this Blog Template. Create as partial view. So there we go. So now you should have just like a blank CSS/HTML file. So at this point, if we just left this blank, then when someone went to a page using this page template, they would just see no content. Obviously, we don't want that, so we're going to add some code to that. So what I'm going to do here too, and I also encourage you guys to do the same, is I'm actually going back in the presentation here. If you just keep going down, these are all the steps I just followed, so you don't need to do all these steps again. Just to reiterate, here's what we did. But you can go here and you can just copy and paste the code that we actually have here. And so before I do that, let me just explain what this code does. For those of you who are familiar with front end, there's a basic style tag, some CSS, some really basic CSS. All it does is make sure that the container is 730 pixels wide and it centers it in the middle. Kind of boring, actually. So and then we have the actual page template code. So this is the stuff that's actually going to do some things for us. So we just have some class names here, some arbitrary class names. Again, this could be the class names you use are entirely up to you and how you guys want to develop websites. Here we have a div which has a container with a blog template, and we have an inner div which is going to contain our sort of main content for this page. And the only server-side code you see here is this at html.renderContentZone, the name of the content zone. So this is a method that's part of agility.web. And what happens is when this page gets executed, agility.web essentially will go and execute all your modules for you. And modules have their own corresponding code file, just like page templates that gets executed. So all this stuff just sort of happens automatically for you. So you guys as developers spend less time boilerplating things and more time writing code. So what I'd suggest you guys do is copy those values. You can actually just click on the copy thing here. And go back into your page template and just paste that in. So now we've got our page template. Cool, looks pretty good. The next thing we're going to want to do here is just quickly validate we didn't make any mistakes here. So an easy way to test this is to go back to Agility here. And now let's just go ahead and create a page using that new page template. So I'm going to create a page just called blog. So creating a new page here. And yeah, and I selected the blog template. So you can see I've got my main content zone. I can click on the plus button here, and here's where I get to add a module that I want. Let's just click a basic one here, rich text area. Rich text area is just a WYSIWYG editor where you can just put in any sort of content. At this point, we're just testing things out. So I can say, okay, great. You know, good old hello world. Save and close. And so now what I can do is I can go back to my website here. I should be able to just refresh this. And you'll see there that new page that I created automatically shows up in the navigation under blog. So clicking on blog, if this worked well, then I should see a page with not a lot of content in the middle. Yeah, there we go. So I see hello world, and that's in a 730 pixel container, and it's, well, the text itself isn't centered, but the container is. That's what we want. So we were able to do that pretty easily. We didn't run into an issue there. If I were to try to access this page on my live server in live mode, I would get a 404 because two things. One, the page itself hasn't been published yet. And two, the code on the live server doesn't have the page template code that I just added. So that's important to note. Cool, so that worked out pretty well. Does anyone have any questions on how to create a page template or why you might create a page template?
No, I have a question about the code.
Okay, question about the code, yeah.
So I understand that the code, well, probably will have something in TFS, for example.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, so some sort of source control, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's say that the page is ready. It will be checked in. So, but the page doesn't go live because you haven't published it with the CMS, correct?
Yes, yeah, so yeah, exactly. So like if you did this update, you checked your code in, it's not going to automatically publish content for you. Yeah, that would still be a next step. So you've done the code side of things, and then the final step after that would be to actually
publish here.
Yeah, yeah, the content is separate from your code.
So
yeah.
the code doesn't need to be moved somewhere else. The code still stays in TFS.
Yeah, code stays in TFS, but you need to deploy your code, right? So where
do I need to deploy?
Depends where your web server is, right? So remember, because it's a decoupled model, your web server, you could have it in your closet. It could be in a cloud environment. It all is sort of up to your sort of DevOps strategy on how you want to deploy that. To give you an example, we're actually rebuilding our own website right now, and we have things set up in a way where we're using a Git repo in Azure DevOps. So we have two branches. We have a master branch and we have a UAT branch. When we check stuff into the UAT branch, we actually have a continuous integration process that will actually go grab the code from there and deploy it to our UAT server. So that way, we don't even have to worry about deploying stuff, and we just check stuff in and just automatically deploys. All right, so yeah, the end result is you should see something like this, which is pretty much what we had. So that's good. Next, we'll actually go ahead and create a module because that was pretty boring. We just created a page template that really didn't do much. So now let's create an actual module. So again, to reiterate, a module is the individual sort of components on a page that an editor can, well, add to a page. So what we're going to do here is.
Just one thing when it comes to the modules. Is this something that's like similar to shared content or some kind of functional piece of the page that can be created, customized, and then embedded in the page?
Yeah. So actually, it's really modules and stuff in shared content, for example, are actually really similar. You're defining a content schema. It's just the only difference is that a module on a page has some sort of code that's going to be executed towards it, whereas shared content is just content that's just sort of free flowing, and you decide how you want to use it. Modules are like, oh, I add this module to the page, which means this code is going to get executed.
For example, like personal information form that can be fully functional within the module. You can need it in multiple places in different pages. You just put the module there, it's gonna.
Yeah, you got to put that in shared content because that would be used across multiple pages. And then you might have a module that you put on a page that just links to your shared content. So like you still like to get anything to show up on a page, you have to have a module on it. And that module, all that module could do is say, oh, okay, I want to look up this thing in shared content and do something with that.
Okay.
Yeah, really, when modules are pretty much you saying, you know, when this thing is on a page, it's going to execute this code. It's going to render this code. And then as a developer, you can put whatever logic you want in there. So for example, you could have a module that pulls stuff from a database that has nothing to do with agility at all. But you still have the module on the page. So editors can, even though the content really isn't in agility at all, you're still giving editors the ability to decide where that content should show up. You know, whether it's on a page, what content zone that's in, you're giving them that sort of flexibility.
Okay, so for example, form validation bits and pieces, how are you going to validate the logic that's validated only in the module?
Mm-hmm.
But the actual layout and form is going to come from the content. Right?
So in an example of a form, what you'd probably have is if a form is going to be used on more than one page, like the same form, you'd probably have that defined in shared content, and then you'd have a module that you can add to any page, which links to that form. And that form, really, the only data you're going to have on that form are things like the labels, like, you know, first name, last name, and those are mainly just the labels you want to have output in there. The actual code to render that form is going to be in your actual code base. Really, it's just the labels, and maybe there's like some general text an editor wants to put in that's going to show above the form. Maybe they want to customize the success message that shows when that form is submitted. That's the kind of content you'd have in the CMS. You don't actually put like HTML or form fields itself in the CMS. That would be in your code. Or another thing you might have in there is like, you know, when this form is submitted, what page should the user be redirected to? You might have that as a thing that's in the CMS that the user can control.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Any interruption to the website while deploying my code?
It depends how you're deploying it and what web server you're deploying it to. But generally speaking, no, there shouldn't be anything like that. So for example, if you're using Azure App Service and you're using Web Deploy will just sort of replace all of your sort of destination content, not content, code all in one go, which will result, I think, in the app recycling. But that would be the only side effect you'd see there.
It might take 1 or 2 seconds.
Your site wouldn't go down, but you know, you might have a request hang for 10 seconds or something like that, right? But there's also ways you can get around that too, depending on how you deploy your code. You can deploy pre-compiled code, which doesn't reset the application pool. But that's a little out of scope of what Agility offers, because it's sort of up to you on how you want to deploy that. That's more of a .NET problem. Yeah, but generally speaking, you shouldn't have to take down your application to do a deployment. That's my thought. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new module, which is just going to display details of a blog post. So think details of a blog post or an article. That's essentially what we're going to create here. So we're going to create one called blog post, and then we're going to sort of tell our code about it. And we're going to add code for the module output. So kind of similar to our page templates. And then we'll add the module to the page that we just created and see what we get. So in the content manager, we want to go to module definitions this time. So you're going to go to settings, module definitions. We're going to create a new module here, and we're going to call this blog post details. This will display the details of the blog post. I can't stress how important it is to put meaningful descriptions for modules, because an editor who's not very familiar with your system will go to try to add a module to a page, and if there's no description of what the module does, they might be totally lost on what to do, and then they'll probably call you and be like, hey, what do I add to this page? So be descriptive as you can in your descriptions. That way, when an editor's adding a module, they'll be able to see it directly there, and they'll get an idea of what it does. Of course, they can always just add modules, preview them, see what it looks like, and change their minds afterwards. You can always do that too. So yeah, we're going to call it blog post details. And we're going to add a couple fields. So under form builder here, this is where we define the fields, the information we want to we want the editor to type in, right? So we have to think here architecturally, what composes a blog post? What do you think composes a blog post? Give me some ideas here. Title, yeah, good place to start. What else? Author. Yeah. Name. So we could do author. Let's do author name. Just for sake of brevity and keeping things moving, one way you could implement this is you could have a separate list of blog post authors, and then you select from a dropdown which author it is, and it links directly to that author ID. And that way you can just have more metadata around what an author actually is and have a biopic and all that stuff. We're not going to do that right now just for time's sake, but we can have a text field for author name for now. And then some other things here that we'd want to have in a blog post would be like the actual details of the post itself. So under the field type here, I'm going to select HTML because that's really going to be the details of our blog post, the actual article that we're writing. So I'll just select HTML. And I'll hit save and new. And then the other thing too is usually blogs have an image. So I'm just going to give a new field here, call it image. And under field type, I'm going to select image. And you'll see here, I mentioned this a bit earlier too, that you can add some validation on these fields. So when you select an image, first of all, you can mark whether it's required or not. You can also set up whether there's a max or a certain cap on file size or a minimum. Same thing with height, width, and valid file types. So for example, if you don't want them to, if you only want them to be able to put in an SVG because you want to make sure that it's a scalable vector format, you could just allow them to upload SVG files and that's it. So we'll leave that blank for now. Now we've got image. And then the next thing we want to do here is after we've selected those items, we want to actually select our output template. So the output template, very similar to Pages, is like, okay, what's the code that's going to get executed when this module is rendered on a page? So here we can select one of three things: partial view and website, MVC controller action, or inline code. I won't go too far into inline code right now, but what I will say is that what you can do is you can actually write code directly in the CMS. So you can actually write the same page template code we had before, or the same module code I'm about to show you now, and have that stored directly in the CMS, and it gets stored as content. So it's like code as content, and you can preview code and you can publish code. So it's great because it keeps you a little agile. You know, you can have people who aren't familiar with Visual Studio, or maybe don't have access to the source code base, where they can go in and create new modules or page templates entirely on their own. Good in some ways, bad in some other ways. So if you're the dev lead on that project, and someone went in there and added some code that's doing some stuff, maybe wasn't written well, maybe it didn't go through the same checks and balances that you normally have, maybe it didn't have a code review. Those are other things to think about as well. So good to know that inline code's an option, but typically we recommend, where possible, maintain things in source control in Visual Studio. It'll make your life easier. So in this case here, we're going to select MVC controller action. So whereas the template we used before had partial view, this one will have an MVC controller action. So this is going to execute some C# code directly. And then the job of an MVC controller is to you know, do business logic and then pass in a view model directly to a partial view, and then there the front end developer takes over and just makes the code look nice, and often a lot of other things. So under the MVC controller action here, we're going to put a new controller here. We're going to create called blog. And then under action, we're going to put in blog post details. So blog is the name of the controller. Blog post details is the name of the action result. So I'm going to hit save and close on this. And you'll see the item here is listed as blog post details. We've got a nice little description there. Now the next thing we need to do here is we need to tell our application about this new content schema we just created. We didn't have to do the same thing with page templates because that works a little bit differently, but for any new content definition or module definition that you create, you'll want to hit this download API button. So what this is going to do is, get this out of the way here. It's going to download a file for me. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Where is it open? Here we go. So here, for those of you familiar with C#, this is essentially just a lot of classes. So there's a class generated here for every single piece of content and module definition that you've created in the CMS. So this is really handy because as a developer, you can reference properties in a strongly typed manner. So that way, as you're developing, you don't have to remember, oh, what did I name that field again? And you're not guessing things and you're not putting in a typo that's going to cause an application error. So it allows you to do compile time error checking. So it's very handy. But as you make changes to schemas, you do need to re-download these items. So I'm going to just copy everything down here. I guess I have a few things in here. There is. Oh, I'm a noob. I'm not doing this the most efficient way here. Just hit shift. There's a shift down. Shift page down.
And control F10.
There we go. It's the function key on the laptop that got me. All right. We'll see. So I'll just copy that. I'm going to go back into my code here. And under models, you'll see I have this file here, underscore API file. This can be placed anywhere in the MVC project. It doesn't matter where it is, as long as you're consistent with however you named your namespace. You'll notice here that I didn't do a straight swap of the files because in here my namespace is different than the one that was auto-generated. So that's fine. I'm just going to replace everything below the namespace with my new content. So now I have that there. So you'll see that that process, took a minute and a bit. If you're coding and then adding fields sort of as you go, you might have to do this multiple times, right? Which can get a little annoying. So we actually have a Visual Studio extension that makes this a bit faster. So I could have accomplished the exact same thing here by right-clicking this, selecting Agility CMS, update model. You do need to log in the first time that you use it. It's going to verify my namespace, which is correct. And it would go ahead and just replace that same file for me. So obviously that is a much faster process. I'd recommend doing that. But if you don't have it,
What's the name of the add-on? Sorry.
what's the name of
The add-on.
the extension? It's the Agility CMS model updater.
If you type in Agility CMS, it should pop up in Visual Studio extensions.
Yeah.
I only found one, but that's the same model updater.
Let's see if we can find it. It should be. I think it's called model updater. We're also working on a version of this for VS Code as well, just so you know. We'll get something similar. So now, what I can do here is I can actually create
model
Yeah, Agility CMS model updater is the name. I just
Is it one word, Agility CMS?
Yeah.
Agility CMS is one word.
So now that we've added, we've updated that. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit here. These are all the details that we just went through. Refresh the classes. It's also important to note that you don't have to use this model. You don't have to use strongly typed objects. You can still reference things by using a string. But I highly recommend using it this way. So here, what we're going to do is, we've updated this sort of schema in our project so that we can reference this data, but we haven't actually added any code yet. So our blog module does rely on this controller being there. So we're going to go back to our code, and I'm going to create a new controller for our blog. So add controller. Oh no, don't crash on me now. There we go. So let's set the controller name to blog controller. And then we can do the same thing in the page summary, just copy this code. Just to tell you what this code does, it explains the action result. You'll see there's a parameter here, module into a blog post details module. That's actually the data for the module being passed to you automatically. So agility.web, like I said, does a lot of things under the hood. It grabs the module data, as in those fields we just added, and will pass that to our action result. So here, all we're doing is we're taking the data and we're passing that directly to our front end view. So I'm going to copy that. And well, I guess I can just paste it all in here. Whoa, not what I wanted to copy. Copy. I guess that copy doesn't work. All right, let's try that again. There we go. Okay. So you'll see here that the reason why we had to do that strongly typed object download class is that this guy was automatically created for us. So if I hit F12 here to look at this definition, you'll be able to see it. This references that file in here, and you can see it has those fields that we define in the content manager: title, author name, details. The image one is further down. So that has all that stuff there for us, which is great. The other really cool thing about this, like I said, is that it already gives us our module data that's being executed for this page. So as a developer, you don't even have to do a data lookup. You already have the data. So it's really quickly to do this stuff. So this is going to return a partial view. The next step here is we need to actually put some code in our partial view. Otherwise, this is going to give us an error. So the next step here is I'm going to go to views. And I'm just going to create a folder here to hold my blog stuff. And I'm going to create a new view. And I call this blog post details. It's partial view. And then I'm going to paste this in here. So I'll explain what this code is doing. This is our partial view. So we have our view model at the top here, which was passed to us by the controller, which has all of our data. And all we're doing here is developers saying, okay, we have a div, got a class name there. We are doing a quick null check. So if there is an image, use it. If not, don't show an image. So if the image is not null, then proceed and display an image. And you see you have an image class, image responsive. Again, class names can do whatever you want it to be. We're setting the source attribute to model.image.url. And you can see there that we're specifying that ad hoc thumbnailing we were talking about earlier today, which is 730. So that way, an editor can upload a blog post that's like 2,000 by 2,000, but when it's actually displayed on the website, it automatically gets thumbnailed to 730. And then there's just, we're also using an alt tag for accessibility to display the label tag of that image. And then we have a H1 for model title. And then here we're outputting raw HTML. And when you do that in MVC, you need to put HTML.raw so that it will actually render the HTML. So now that we have that in place, I do need to build the project because we did make a change to some compiled files. So we just need to hit build. Then we can go back to Agility here. What is this thing? I can go back to Pages, and we can use this module we just created on our blog page. So I can click New. And I can select my blog post details module that I just created. And again, remember I said the description, this is where the description shows. So I'm gonna go ahead and click add. And so here I've got title, author name, and details. So let's go ahead and fill some stuff in here. This is a sample post. It's me. We've got some details here. Let's generate some lorem ipsum here. And paste that in there. And then from image here, Grammarly does not like that text. So when you're dealing with attachment fields, you can either upload an image directly from your computer, or you can browse one from that already from the Medium document. So from this, I'm just going to select an existing item as opposed to uploading a new one. Let's just select this guy. Oh, looks good. So I've got that in there. It shows a little preview as well. And so now I can hit save and close. And so if I did this right, well, let's get rid of this guy. We don't need that one anymore. If I did this right and we refresh this page, it should actually show image at the top and body text below. Whenever I use Zoom, my internet is just destroyed. All right, there we go. So this is what we wanted. This is displays our image, 730 pixels, and then our text right there is sort of centered right in the middle. So to reiterate the steps for creating a new module is we went into Agility, we created a new module definition, we entered in the fields that we want to collect from the editor. We then said in the CMS that it's supposed to execute a piece of code. We then went into our code base, we added that corresponding code, and then if we wanted to break down this module a little bit more in a realistic scenario, if you're a full stack developer, you might have done this everywhere from start to finish. In some cases, you might have a backend developer who goes and creates the modules and does the controller sides of things, and then maybe just returns a blank partial view. So then maybe the front-end developer afterwards goes in and sort of fills in this area here. Are there any questions on how to create a module?
Go
ahead.
About the preview mode.
Yeah.
I noticed that, well, of course, you're using local because you haven't actually published that to the staging environment.
Yeah.
Say. But that preview mode is always static, or it renews.
So when you're previewing content, it actually pulls things down in real time. So as soon as you create new content, and if you like refresh the preview, you'll see it. It might take a few seconds for it to download that item again, but it's real time.
Let's say that I have a preview mode that you already shared with me a week ago. That
the
mode
link.
will keep working?
No, the link itself will expire. So if you try to use it, you'll just be still in live mode. So I don't know what the timeout is on those.
I don't know the default time.
I don't remember exactly either, but it's like, it's not minutes,
No,
but it's not days either. I don't remember exactly what the.
Needs to be refreshed and provided.
Yeah.
Is that configurable or does it have an?
No, not
You can
configurable. It could be.
preview from time, like, but I don't.
Yeah, that's
think you
different.
can
That's more like
configure
how
it.
long is that link going to be available for? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know the time.
Good question. We have to look that.
Yeah, I can look up the code.
It's okay. You don't have to do it right now.
Well, let's say that you want to share that preview mode with a client, and they take 3 days to actually verify. So it will work with those 3 days?
I don't know.
Well, the best way to do it, if the client has access to it, usually, like you would usually want to give the link to the page if you are providing it to a third party, which is not the client. If it's the client, they already have access to the CMS. You can just give them the link to the page from the CMS link, so that they can see the preview button and then they can click on it.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah. Yeah. So what you're just saying is if they have a content manager login.
They can do it inside.
Yeah, so you could just literally go to, okay, let's go to pages here. Let's say you want to show them this page. You could literally just copy this URL. They would log in there and they'd be able to see it and just hit preview.
Or if your UAT site or your stage site was always set to pull in.
Yeah,
preview only,
you could also
just
set it
share
up
the
that way
UAT
too,
site.
yeah. So that way you would deploy, there's a switch in the web config that turns on development mode. You just set that to true, deploy that up, and then if anyone hits that URL, it'll permanently in preview. But you got to make sure that's not a public facing thing. Otherwise, yeah, people might stumble upon it.
One thing to keep in mind, though, it shouldn't be set up as a syncing web server if you deployed it as development mode, because the two will not work well. Let's put it that way.
Sorry, I didn't get that one.
So, like, if you syncing web servers we were talking about, if you define a syncing web server that is running in dev mode, then it will not play nice together, basically. So
yeah,
you shouldn't be
so
syncing to a dev mode.
Yeah, there's no, if you have something deployed in development, there's no need to sync content to it because it's always going to pull it down in real time. Okay. Where was I here? So yeah, we just created that module, got that set up. So can anyone see, I don't want to say a problem, but like a limitation with the architecture we just put in? Think about a real use case, right? We just created a module where editors can now create a single page. They can create any page anywhere they want, but every time they would have to create a blog post, they'd have to create a page, add this module to a page, and then what might end up happening is you might have pages all over the page tree that are blog posts. And as a developer, you might get a request to say, hey, can you have a page that generates a listing of all the blog posts? And then you're like, well, I don't know which pages are blog posts. So one of the things we would do in this case is blog posts really should be in a shared content list. So then that way you have a list of items. So an editor, when they log in, can go to shared content. They see a list of blog posts. They create a new blog post, and that's it. And when they publish it, it automatically publishes a page for that blog post. And then it also keeps all of your URLs consistent and structured. So that is the right way to create blog posts. I just wanted to quickly show you guys how to, just create a module in general. But now we'll go through the process of actually doing this the right way. So we're going to modify this module a little bit to make it work more in a more dynamic sense. Yeah, cool. All right. So yeah, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new content definition representing our blog post schema. And the fields we're going to put in there are actually the same fields right now that we just put on our module. We're just going to move them from, we're essentially going to move the content from the page level to shared content. And then we're going to initialize what we call a dynamic page list in Agility, which essentially is just like a special shared content list that gives you SEO properties for things like pages. Because each blog post, you should be able to control the meta tags, meta description, all that kind of stuff for it. So, it's blocked by this thing. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to create that blog post definition. So it's very similar to modules. We're going to go to content definitions. We're going to create a new item here, and we're going to call this blog post. And again, you know, what does a blog post consist of? Well, it consists of a title, consists of details. So I'm just putting in the same fields that we had put in before on our module. I'm just moving here. So title, HTML, and then we also want image. Nice. You'll notice here that there's no output template tab. There's no code that gets executed with stuff that's in shared content. We're just initializing a list. That's it. So we're creating this. Right now we just have the schema. Next, what we'll do is we'll go into shared content here. And we are going to create a new list based on our schema. And you'll see here, these are the different types of things you can create in shared content. You can create a content item, which is a single item, like we already had for our global header and footer that we're using. It's not what we want to do in this case. We want a list. So we could use a content list. But again, this isn't just a regular content list. Each one of these items is going to represent its own page. So we're going to use a dynamic page list so we can have those additional properties and use some dynamic routing. The last option there is a folder. The folder is just used for organizational purposes in this tree. If you have a lot of things in shared content, it can be helpful to organize them into folders. But that doesn't have any effect on anything else aside from just organizing it in this UI. So under content definition here, we're going to select blog post, and I'm going to use a plural name for this. So it's our list of blog posts, plural, and select the page content, page list, and hit save. So now you can see here our blog posts are actually under our dynamic page list folder, right where we also had products, because products work in a very similar sense in the sandbox. Each product has its own page essentially. Actually, to show you guys what I'm talking about, you'll see here under products, you'll see I have this little special type of page that has a couple of list icons. This represents that this is a dynamic page node. And we're going to be doing the same thing for our pages. Let's check our blogs. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to create that dynamic page node. So the end result here, what we want to do is we want to have, so let's say if I have a blog post called Hello World, I want the URL of that to be blog slash, URL, blog slash hello dash world, like a friendly version of that title, right? That's the end goal here. And then that way, any blog that I create will automatically be created under that path. So I'm going to create a new type of page here under our blog page, and I'm going to select dynamic page. So here it's going to tell me what page template I want to use. I'll just use my blog template, which we've already created. And I also, this is the key part here, is that where do you want to automatically sort of generate pages from? You have to base it on the list. It gives us two options. We can do it for products and we can do it for blog posts. We want to do it for blog posts. Sitemap label. This represents just like what the item is going to look, what the actual dynamic page is going to appear in the page tree. So we're just going to call this blog details, just so it's clear to us. And then here under page path formula, this is saying, you know, how do you want to generate the URLs for these dynamic pages? And so this can use dynamic fields from your content item. Remember, we only had 3 fields for blog posts. We had title, details, and image. I can only really use title here because you can't use an image in a URL path, and you don't want to use HTML as to build your URL either. So we're just going to put title. And you can see the way this works, hashtag, hashtag, title, hashtag, hashtag. This means that it's going to look at the title of my items. So that way, any incoming request comes into my website, the blog / something, it's going, Agility is automatically in your website going to say, oh, this page is coming in, it matches a certain path. Is there an item in this list that matches that formula? If so, render that item. I'll show you that. So we'll leave the rest as default. So essentially our default page title, when the page loads, is going to be title, which is the title of our blog post. And then if this gets used in some sort of menu generation later on, it'll also use the title field for that. So, good stuff. I'm just going to hit save. And so now you can see here that it's got that special little list icon there to show that this is the dynamic page. And it's also some text saying this page is built from the blog posts list. And if you forget that, you can just click on the item here and you can see this list. So let's create some sample content here. So let's call this sample post 1. And let's put in some content here. Oh, that's better. Whatever. Save and close. And then just to make things a little quick here, I'm just going to copy that item. Yeah, let's copy one more. And then let's just make these unique quickly. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we want to add that module that we already created, the blog post details, to this content zone. But there's a bunch of fields here that we actually really don't need anymore. I'm just going to leave them blank because we're not using these fields anymore. We're using the fields that are going to be in our list. So I'm going to clean up that module a little bit by going to settings, module definitions, blog post details, and we'll just remove these fields because we don't need them anymore. All right. Now, the next step I want to do here is we want to update our code. Because think about what our code was doing before. Our code was looking for content in those fields, and it was going to just output those fields. Now we need to do something a bit different. We have a dynamic page, and we need to essentially match get whatever the dynamic item is currently rendering and use those fields. So I'll show you how we would do that. Just gonna skip down here. So this is our updated code. I'll just copy that. Controller. There we go. So you'll see here that we have some squiggly lines. Again, this is the power of using strong type objects in C#. This is telling us, hey, what the heck is a blog post? I don't know what that is yet. And the reason is why do you think that is? Why do you think it doesn't know what blog posts are?
We haven't downloaded the API.
You got it. So we've got to refresh our models here. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to just do this the quick way. Update model. Boom. Yes. Yes. There we go. Now turn screen. So got that problem resolved. And now let's walk through this code a little bit and see what this is doing a bit different now. So remember, we still have our content on the module, but our module itself has no fields anymore. So really, our module is useless to us. We don't really care about it. Its sole purpose was just to execute this code when it was added to a page. Then we look at this line here, blog post equals agility context, get dynamic page item blog post. Agility already figures out when the page is being rendered whether whether a dynamic item was found based on the URL path. So if it found one, this is going to have a value. If it doesn't find one, it's going to be null. So if it's null, well, let's just go ahead and throw a 404 because someone just went to some path that was /blog/gobbledygook, something that doesn't match an actual post in our blog post list. So we handle that by just saying, okay, just return a 404 if it doesn't match. Otherwise, let's pass our blog post view model directly to our partial view that we had before. So the next thing I need to do is go back to our blog post details item here. And you can see these are now giving me squiggly lines because my module doesn't contain those properties anymore because I deleted them and then I updated the API. So I can now just change this to be models dot, and again, IntelliSense is your friend. We can find our blog post that we just created. And that actually should, I don't know why it's still giving me squiggly lines because that actually should just work. Sometimes Visual Studio doesn't work. All right. So let's go ahead and build this. I'm feeling pretty confident.
Squiggly red lines there.
I don't see any lines. So now we're going to go back and let's test this thing. So what we're going to do here is no, not that one. That one. So this module now, remember this is on the /blog page where I still had that module where I had content. This should just actually just show nothing because I removed those fields that were on there initially. Or actually, I don't know what would happen actually. It would actually probably just give me a 404. Yeah, 404. Because what ends up happening is this didn't match a dynamic route, and my module just threw a 404. So now, remember I created 3 blog posts: sample post 1, sample post 2, and sample post 3. So I'm just going to manually type in something that should match. So that should match our route formula for sample post 1. There we go. So a couple of things happen here. You see here the page title is now sample post 1 automatically. So Agility automatically handles that because it found the dynamic page, and we had set the page path form or the page title formula to look at the title field that was on our blog post. So it did that. And then it also automatically figured out the dynamic page for me, and it's displaying sample post. And then as well, if I go to sample post 2, that should also work. Yeah, now it's showing the separate sample post 2, and then 3. And that should be the same thing. Now, if I did sample post 4, this will return a 404 because that does not match any blog post that I've created. So the power of dynamic pages is it allows you to, think in real world scenarios. When someone says, hey, I want a blog, they're probably going to have, like, especially if it's a bigger customer, probably going to have hundreds of blog posts, maybe thousands, depending. You don't want them creating individual pages in the page feed for each one of those because then you don't really know which is the blog. You need to have structured content, right? So put that in shared content, make a dynamic page list, and then that way it's so easy for editors now to be able to create new blog posts. They don't have to create a page for it. All they have to do is just go to shared content, find the item find the list in here, which is blog posts, create a new one, and then it's automatically enabled to the site. Now we are missing one key piece of the puzzle here, and that's a listing view. Right now, there's no way for people to actually find your blog posts. We haven't done that yet, so that'll be the next thing that we'll do quickly is just create a module that loops through all of our blog posts and spits out details links for each one of those. But I think it's time for another little break, and then we will resume and create the listing module just after that. So I want to resume back at 4:30. And then we'll finish off with showing you guys how to do that listing module, and we'll open up some Q&A. And if we have time, I'd be happy to talk about some of the new stuff we have going on.
Okay. Go ahead, sorry. Okay.
Page. If you go to settings and you look at weblogs, Here, this is my deployed web server here, and I have a log file. Is that today? That's not today. No, it's not today. So yeah, I guess it didn't log that file. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong about that. But yeah, here's where you'd be able to see all of your application errors through this log file. There are also a lot of other ways to log errors and things too. We're not always saying you have to use the Agility error logs. You know, for example, there's like things like application insights that Azure provides, and a lot of other things too. So it's not the only place where you should be logging errors, but you can rate things to this log whenever you want. It is handy though, because you know any syncing web series you have set up here will be listed. You'll be able to view the web logs remotely just through here. Okay. So I'm going to resume where, where I was talking. Well, let me fix this thing here first. To fix this, I mean, this is a sandbox, so I don't really care. Normally, I wouldn't do this unless I knew that I had deployed my code into production, but I don't really care. So I'm just gonna hit publish. So post that definition, and now you'll see here that this actually should go through on its own. Or do I need to republish the page?
No, it should take care of it by itself. As far if I did a good job last time I changed the code. So like fingers crossed. Looks like it's doing a good thing. Wait, there's one more thing that seems to.
How often does Agility release updates and upgrades?
You want to speak to that or?
Yeah, I mean it's monthly. We do monthly releases, and then if there's if there's a problem that arises, we'll do patch releases in between. But you can pretty much rest assured do that. We do things on a monthly basis. I think you do need to publish the page again.
Which template did you create to send those from? Maybe that template doesn't have the Oxford. Anyway, I did a bad job there.
Yeah, there we go. That was done. All right, so I'm going to go back to where we were talking before, which is the missing piece of this puzzle, and that's our listing page. So we're going to show here how we can get reference to a content list in Agility, how we can loop through those, and how we can generate links for those. So that blog listing module we're going to create is going to go here on this page. So we're going to delete this guy because that one doesn't really do what we want it to do anymore. And we're going to go to module definitions. Create a new module definition. We call this blog listing. And this will list all blog posts. And under fields here, we're just going to give it, we really could probably get by not putting any fields in here, but we'll give it a title field, a title for our list, essentially. And then the other thing here is that we're going to create a thing label for posts. And under field type, here we're going to use a special type of field type, and that's called link content. Linked content allows you to, well, link different types of content together. So if you need to reference other types of content, this is the field you want to use. It's like a link reference. And what we're going to do here is we're going to link this to our blog post definition. And we're going to specifically point it to a list that's been created using that definition, such as our blog post list. And then you can see here there's a few render as options. And when I say render as, this means render as in the input form for the editor. So how should the editor interact with this list of blog posts? Well, in this case, they really don't need to interact with it at all, because we're going to create a module that's just going to loop through all of them and display them all. Alternatively, we could allow them to render as a drop-down list for them to select a specific blog post that they want to show, or a checkbox list where you can show multiple blog posts, or a search list box where imagine if you had 1,000 blog posts and you want the editor to be able to select one or many of those items, they'd be able to search that auto completes the blog post. They'd be able to select one or many blog posts to associate with. In this case, we're just going to use a simple link, and I'll show you why in a bit. So we'll set that up, and then under output template here, we want to create. We'll just set this to use a partial view as opposed to a controller action result. So let's do views, blog listing.cshtml. And we'll hit save and close. And again, since we made a change to our schemas, I could hit download API here and do it the long way. I would much rather do it this way. So go back into models here. All right. And now, again, we want to create the corresponding view for it. Or actually, before we do that, let's go back to Agility here, and let's add that blog post we just created to a page. So we'll go back to our blog here where it's empty, and we want to add that listing module. So now we can add blog listing. And then our title here, we can say like, our listing of posts. And you can see here, there's a field for blog post. This is just a reference field. So if I'm an editor here and I'm on this page and I see the module, pretend I don't know anything, right? I come to this page, I see a module that says blog listing, and I've been instructed to add a new blog post. Maybe I don't really know where things are, but I know there's a page called blog that has blog posts on there. I go there, I click on the page, I open up the blog listing module, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's a list of blog posts here. I guess I add one there. I can edit content there. And this is just a shortcut to shared content. So accessing the list here versus going shared content and going to posts is the exact same thing. There's also one other benefit of that, and I'll show you that in the second code. We'll go back to this here. So we're going to copy some code to put in our partial view, which is all the way down here. Yeah. So we're going to copy all this stuff here. And I'm going to create my view. Blog listing. Oh, I named it post, not blog post. So this is on a partial view. Normally you'd probably do this in a controller action result, but I just did it all here in one thing just to show you all the code in one nice little view to see what it's doing. So what we're doing here is when this module gets executed, Agility.web is automatically, because we're calling a partial view directly and we're not using a controller action result, it's automatically going to pass the data from the module as a parameter to your view model for us. So you just need to put this in here. And there's this line here, var posts equals model.post.items. So model in this case is a reference to our module. And remember, our module has two fields in it, title and posts. So if I want to just enumerate all posts and get all posts from that list, all I have to do is model.post.items. So I created a reference field in Agility, and then internally in Agility.web, it just figures out and gets and I can enumerate that whole list. So to get my post, all I have to do is this code here, which is really straightforward. Or let's say I didn't have a link content field like this where I could do that before. I could also just get anything from a shared content using a query like this. New Agility content repository, pass in the type of the content, pass in the reference name of the list, and then you can enumerate them. You can also do things like under items, I want to, no one tell us one sec, come on. There we go. I'll just show you guys this. So you can pass in a variety of different things here. You can pass in a row filter. So if you only want to get a subset of items from this list, depending on certain criteria, you would pass that in. Cert parameters, in parameters, skip parameters, out, total count, everything you need to be able to implement pagination on any sort of list in Agility. So using that one call is very powerful, and you can get all your content through that way of doing things. There's no real performance hits on doing those because, again, remember, all of this content is stored locally in the file system. So the only overhead you're going to have is if you try to enumerate a list of like 100,000 items, you're going to be doing that in memory, which is a bit of an overhead. So that's why we have those skip and take parameters. So even if you're working with things, just working things in small chunks that you need. So for example, in our blog listing here, you might only need the first 10. So you can just put in a take parameter of 10 to get the first 10. So we'll leave that as is. We also have another helper method here. Because helper, all we've done here is we just have a list of posts. And then down here, we actually just loop through those posts and display the information about those. So we have an H3 tag. And in that H3 tag, you want to have an anchor directly to the dynamic link for that. So you'll see here that we're using this get post link, and we're passing in the page path of the dynamic node in Agility. This uses a function here, get post link, which is just some boilerplate code that you can copy and reuse. Essentially what it does is it just automatically figures out the dynamic URL for that dynamic page item for you. Because otherwise you might not really know. And that's always, that's linked directly to the page path formula. So if you change the page path formula in Agility, this will update automatically as well. All you need to do is just need to know where the dynamic page actually is. So now that we've got that in place, let's just save that, do a build. And we should be able to go back to our blog here. And if we're lucky and I didn't make any mistakes, I should see a listing of all of our posts with a link for each one that I'd be able to go to. And then I see the full details page for that post. Did I not do, maybe I didn't. So that would be the error that you get if you forgot to update your APIs. There we go. Well, line 19. Where did I screw up here?
Post.
No, I just didn't name this thing.
Yeah. That's what I meant to say.
Oh yeah.
You need to
For this case, I don't need to build again because that was just a CS HTML file and those aren't compiled. So you don't need to do that. You only need to compile if you're changing something in a good.cs file. Yeah. So there we go. There's our listing of blog posts. Now it pretty much outputs all the details of all three of them right now. But if I also hover over each one of these, I can click on them, and that'll render my full details for that specific post. So the other thing that's happening there too is you'll see that the images are shown much smaller here. And again, that's because we're using that ad hoc thumbnailing. So we're setting the width to 150, and that's why those are shown that way. So we're not showing those high-res images, and we're reusing essentially one image field in various different sizes. Are there any questions on why dynamic pages are important, or the process of creating listing views, accessing shared content, anything like that?
Where do you limit the number of items that you're going to display?
Great question. So what I would do here is you would do items. I don't know why I'm not in TeleSense here. So I don't remember what the exact syntax is. It's items. That's row filter. There we go. Sort, don't care about sort, take. Yeah, so let's say I only want to take 2 items. You still need to specify skip 0. And let's just, oh, actually that one will override it anyways. There we go. So now, if I refresh this, so now I don't have that 3rd item. Let me get this out of the way. Yeah. Now there's only 2 items in there. So that's how you would be able to limit the amount of items that want to show up here. Another good thing to do too is to actually make that something that's configurable in the module, right? So when an editor adds a blog listing module to a page, they're able to say how many ones that they want to be able to show. Maybe they only want to show 3, maybe they want to show 20. I don't know, right? So that would be a good thing to also add in the module. Any other questions about this? All right, cool. So that's good. Did I miss anything else here? We're good. All right, so the last step here is actually deploying our changes. So we made these updates, and we sort of talked about, now we need to actually deploy these live. So this specific steps will vary depending on what web server you're deploying to. But for this example, and for the sandboxes you guys have signed up for, they're using Azure App Service. So you'd be following the same steps as I. There's lots of different ways to deploy those. But for simplicity, we'll just use web deploy. So what I'm going to do here is, generally speaking, you want to deploy your code first before you go and start publishing content, right? Because we have content that we've created that doesn't really even make sense for our current website because it doesn't have any code to do anything with those. So we'll deploy our code first, then we'll go ahead and publish all the content afterwards. So in Agility here, in Visual Studio, I can hit publish. And again, steps will vary depending on where your web server actually is. And I can import from a profile. And what I need to do here is, remember that source code file that you may have downloaded earlier that had all your stuff? There's actually a deployment file in that. So I can just select this guy. So that's going to give me, essentially it's just a file that has authentication to be able to deploy. And so now I can just hit publish. So by default, that's going to deploy, and it's going to do a couple of things for me during this process. As well, you'll see here my web config has some transforms. This is my this web config is like the local web config, right? I have development mode equals true, but you'll see my release config. I have development mode equals false. I also have changed the location of where we are putting our content cache file path, which is the content repository, and our log file path. It's just because in that server environment, they're just mapped to different drives. So I'm able to apply a transform here. And you'll see that that deployment just went through. It's automatically opening up my production server for me. This should just show me my home page, and I shouldn't even see, well, I guess I will see the blog page in the menu because we did go ahead and publish that. Cool. And I'm still in preview mode as well. So this is actually a good test to do is once you've deployed your content, now before I go ahead and publish stuff, in preview, I can just make sure everything's still working properly before I go ahead and start publishing content. So I can click on my blog. And you'll see here, those are my two things, capped at 2. And if I open up one of these guys, this should work as well. So there we go. Everything looks good. At this point, we are ready to publish stuff. So let's start by going with our blog post. So I can just hit publish on these guys, and then I'll publish the whole list. I'm going to check my module definitions and make sure all of my definitions are published. Yes, they are, so that's good. Now I can go back into pages and I can publish this guy. I could go ahead and publish this page individually and then publish the page underneath it. Or I could do something like this, advanced selection, and I can just select subpages. And I want to publish both of these guys. So if you have like a nested folder with a bunch of things, you don't have to go through individually and hit publish. You can just do this and kick off a nested or a cascaded publish. There we go. You can see here my blog details also has a green check mark on it. Everything's been published. I can now exit preview mode here, and everything should work exactly the same way. There we go. I'm on this page. Go back to our listing page.
Closing that bar, exit preview mode, or did it
Yes.
just hide the bar?
It exits preview mode. Yeah. No, my blog. Most of it is empty.
You're gonna fix it after the fact.
Hmm? Yeah, that's really weird. I did this exact same workshop before, and I had the exact same problem. So there's something in my step that I keep messing up. Yeah, in preview it's there. Strange. It might just need another module definition published. So these types of issues are very few and far between, I can tell you that. But for some reason, I've managed to reproduce it consistently. Let me just go ahead and publish this definition. I don't know. Let's just there we go. There we go. So yeah, there's something weird happened there. I think it was how I published that module definition. I had to go ahead and publish it again for whatever reason. Anyways, but now we have that working and published. So does anyone have any questions on that sort of deployment process and how that might work? Yeah.
So, okay, I saw the 3 web configs that you had. If I understand that the code goes to each environment. But I noticed that you didn't change the URL when you publish and preview it.
Correct.
It means that the code goes one place, but the content goes only in one place.
So in this case, I only have one server to deploy to, and when I deployed it, I only deployed to one server. Even if I had multiple, what I had done there through Visual Studio would have only deployed that that code to one server.
What I'm trying to say is, will you have a UAT website that even if you preview or publish, when you publish, go to UAT only, no production? And when you go to production,
you could set it up that way. By default, when you publish content, it'll go to everything, and then when you create new content, you can preview it anywhere. That's by default how it will work. But you could go and like for example, under syncing web servers here, kind of hard to show you because I only have one server in here, but I could click on this guy and deactivate it, and then leave it so that my UAT is the only one accepting content updates.
And then you need to reactivate it and send it.
Yeah, and then once I want any published changes to go through in my lab environment, I would just go back here. Actually, like I'll show you what that looks like. So let's go make some changes. All right, so I made a few content changes now. My server is deactivated. So, I mean, I can still click publish. What it's going to do right now is it's not actually going to synchronize the content anywhere. It's going to try to, but you can see there it went really quickly. Go ahead and publish. So at this point, what's done is that we've essentially seeded items that need to be synced, but they haven't actually synced anywhere yet. So now I can go to reports. I can click on sync, detailed sync status. Oh yeah, it doesn't show that because it's deactivated. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, so right now it looks like nothing's there. That's because my web server is deactivated. Now if I go back to my syncing web server and I want to activate it, so you'll see here that there's items pending. If I go to detailed sync status, these are my changes that I've made that are now pending. So at this point, I can say, okay, I have these items that are sort of haven't been synced yet and they're waiting for me. So I can just hit sync pending, say, yeah, these can now go out to live because I've tested them somewhere else. Sync pending. And now it'll go through those items one by one. And you can monitor the sync here. And there we go. Now that's done. Go back here. There's my face. So yeah, at any time you can deactivate a web server and just sort of put a hold on all updates that are happening.
Is there any way to have, for example, permalinks or something like actually needs to be actually ported to UAT because it's UAT environment, and another different one to production? Like when I publish it, I mean, some kind of know where it goes.
Oh, right. So like if you're looking at a piece of content, you know which environment it's into. We don't have anything like that yet. It's certainly in our roadmap because we want to have more visibility on essentially where your content is. But in the meantime, if you wanted to know if content was synced, if you go to the detailed sync status, published will list a list of all of your published content items, so you can see what has been published. So with a little digging, you can find out if something's been synced to a certain web server or not. But yeah, we don't have anything too user friendly for that yet. Yeah. So, are there any other questions around the syncing process or anything that came up from the showing you guys that?
When you make a bunch of changes on Agility,
yeah.
Let's say you add like 10 new pages. Do you have to go to each one and publish each one? Is there an area where you can see everything you've made changes? So
yeah.
Don't forget to publish something.
Great question. So that's why we had the recent changes report. So, oh no, sorry. This is just the log of changes. Sorry, there's the ready to publish report. Ready to publish report will list anything you've created. So this right now, this is listing anything in the last day that's been created that hasn't been published. So yeah, to answer your question there, you can also take advantage of another advanced feature called batches, which allows you. So like, let's say you're an editor and you're working on a bunch of things, and you want to make sure when you're done, like let's say you're working on a bunch of things this week, and then like in some unknown date in the future, you have to go and publish those things. You can use what's called batches. So for example, if I made a change to my homepage and I want to include that in a batch, I can create a batch here. Let's call this like, March week 3. You can make it private so that only you can see it, or you can share it amongst other people on your team. So now this page is added to a batch, and when an item is in a batch, you'll see the little stack here on the right. It says that this is part of the March 3 batch. And then you can go through on other things too. So if I go to my products page, for example, I can decide that I want to include this pending change to my March 3 batch. And I can see that there. So now, let's say a couple weeks from now, my content manager has notified me and says, hey, you know that stuff you did a while back, you're going to publish that. If I didn't really keep track of this, at least mentally or in my head, I might be like, oh man, what did I do again? So you'd be able to go back to reports here, click on batches. Here I should be able to find my batch. Eventually. There we go. Yeah, you can actually see that Agility creates some batches automatically for you in the backend. That's actually how most of our syncing happens. But this is the one that we actually just created here. You can select that. And then here you can decide to only publish a single item, or you can just go ahead and just publish everything.
Can you schedule a sprint or release? Specific time?
Actually,
It's a batch.
you can do them individually.
Yeah, you can't do it in a batch.
Well, you can't do it in a batch.
Individually, yeah.
Individually, yeah. So yeah, that's you're actually right. When we did batches, we left that out as a phase 2 of the batches. But content scheduling is a great question, so I can cover that now. So this product's page, for example, let's just remove the batch. I can, under the scheduling tab, so you can schedule anything in Agility, whether it's a page, a module, or a content item. You set to enable scheduling, you set a release date on when you actually want it to be published, and pull date is when you want it to be unpublished. And unpublished is essentially just like completely removed from the site.
UTC?
It depends. So right now this will default to your browser default, and then you can update it to use a different time zone. So if you want to set up a different time zone, essentially what we do, all of our stuff is computed in the back end in Eastern time, and then any front end stuff that you do here for your time zone is just for your own usage. Everything gets saved internally as Eastern time. Pages are a little specific because when you want a page to come down, like not be available after a certain amount of time, you don't really want it to just 404 necessarily. I don't know, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So there's a redirect URL field in here so that when the page comes down and a request comes in to hit that page, you can have it redirect something if you want to. Yeah, it was a heavily requested feature for us to put in.
So just to triple confirm.
Yeah.
So you really don't, let's say that you have the QA stage and production environment for our website.
Yeah.
You don't have 4 websites, you only have one pointing to all 4 at the same time. And you activate or deactivate.
Yeah, we don't really call this a website, this is more an instance, but yeah.
But when you publish, you need to select the environment where you want to publish.
No, but by default, like whatever servers are currently active, it'll publish to all of those websites.
So you need to have all 4 environments listed.
Yes.
And deactivate and activate depends on what you want.
Yeah, exactly. In most cases, honestly, we find that people will typically not deactivate a syncing web server unless they're potentially making a huge sweeping change. Usually they'll just keep things in place. And we have some guides and stuff on our help site that explain, what potential breaking changes are and how to avoid them and work around them. So I think as long as you understand what those things are, you don't necessarily have to always deactivate things. But sometimes it's always better to be safe than sorry. Cool. All right, so I think that pretty much covers the things I wanted to cover in this workshop. I know it's 5 o'clock now, or 5:07 now. So I guess I want to take this chance to answer any other questions that you guys might have. I know I went through some burning questions at the beginning of the session, but it seems like most of you just really want to get a demo of what it's really sort of all about and get familiar with things and maybe just get a refresher on stuff. So if you have any other specific questions, now would be a good time to ask me. I also have just a couple of things I want to show you guys as well in terms of things we're working on in the future. But first, if you have any questions, I'm all yours. No? Okay, let me just check with the online folks. Hey, for those of you that are still online, any specific questions you might have for me? Okay, so we'll take that as a no. Yeah, quickly before you guys, I'll take off. I know it's Friday and no one wants to get home and start the weekend, but today what we showed you is really how to work with agility today. But there's also been a lot of updates that we've been doing to sort of modernize our tech stack and to also bring in, essentially be able to have more different types of developers work on our product. Because up until now, if you weren't really a .NET developer, there were ways to get content out of the CMS, but not quite the standard that we would have liked. So right now we are working very heavily on a REST API. I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the session, but that is going to enable any developer with any tech stack to be able to work with agility in a similar way as we do for .NET. We also have, so that's one thing, REST APIs. We'll also have a JS SDK, which you can use with Node, React, Vue, all that stuff coming out as well. So for developers that aren't that familiar with .NET and they're more front-end focused, that's going to be a really good fit for you guys. In terms of working with the .NET Sync SDK, we also have .NET Core right now in sort of a beta state. We're actually using it to build our new agility website. So there's a lot of benefits to using .NET Core. And I find it's a really good middle ground between sort of .NET Framework and Visual Studio and like all JavaScript application, because you can actually build your website in .NET Core using Visual Studio, VS Code, which is cross-platform. And so you can have developers that are working on Macs, they could be working on Linux, they could be working on Windows, and all that will work. So it's now cross-platform compatible. These are more features of .NET Core, not necessarily agility on .NET Core, but there's that. There's also ways that you can set up your project. We have some examples of how you can use React and .NET Core with server-side rendering that essentially replaces all the stuff I showed you in terms of using Razor views and CSHTML to use React components all in JavaScript. You can server render those. So we've done a lot of exploring in there, and we really think that's going to be valuable to some folks. So if you are interested in learning more about putting together those types of projects, whether it's React or using JavaScript with agility, we're certainly getting there. Within the next few months or so, you'll see a lot of things actually being publicly released by us. For now, it's sort of in private preview, but I do encourage you guys to go to our GitHub page. We are uploading lots of projects there. So that's GitHub/agility. And I'll show you guys just a few of the things that are there. In case anything piques your interest, you can take a look and see how we did it. So our Agility Content Fetch JS SDK, this is our JavaScript API, which you can actually play around with a little bit right now. Kind of just work with dummy data at the moment. But you can get an idea of what we're doing. So you use that using NPM. You can integrate that into Webpack, into any sort of React application. We do have an example of an Agility Create React app. Create React app is just a sort of boilerplate for React sites and how you can use Agility with that. We've also got couple sites, it's a couple examples on how to use Agility with .NET Core. This one here is sort of a blank template, sort of boilerplate start for ASP.NET Core. There's also this other one here, ASP.NET Core React sample site. This one is actually a cut of our current Agility website that we're building. And we did a ton of research in here in terms of how to get .NET Core working with server-side rendering and using React for everything front-end. So for front-end developers, this is a really good mix. You still have, the back-end Microsoft developers, but on the front-end, is a lot more open. You don't need to know anything in .NET or C#. So that's sort of where Agility is heading in terms of opening up our platform so that more developers can partake in it. But it's not like we're going to be retiring .NET MVC anytime soon. That's not going to happen. That is still if you were to build a site today, that's what we would recommend. But just want to give you guys a sneak peek into the future and where we think you guys are going to like it. I hope so, anyways. Yeah, that's about it. That I think. All right. Well, I guess we can call it. Stop sharing.